Today I'm going to be sort of modifying the way that the rear view camera works. I want to, first off, under the initial installation, it has a bunch of lines that run through the screen when you put in reverse because there's interference. So I'm going to try to remediate that with a capacitor filter and also providing a bit more power by tapping into the fuse box and running an add line through that. So I'm going to show you a bit about that and how to do that, and kind of where I'm going to be placing things in the van. Having to run a bit more wire because of this, unfortunately, and I did get a new RCA line, video line, because the last one was just a bit too short and it did get damaged when I was moving out of my last place. So get started with that, kind of show you where to start and some schematics on what I'm kind of working with here. Alright, here's what van building's all about. So initially I had this wire, which is from the rear view camera, and initially I had it run underneath the panels, and then I ran into a roadblock down in that corner and how I was going to get it up through there discreetly. Now, at the end of the day, it probably would be fine to go all the way underneath there. I wanted to go up high. Starting to see some issues with how I'm going to conceal this up here, so I might need to go low in the channels again. I just looking at this channel, I mean, that'll accept it. Here, I mean, I could lay it probably in here and it'd be fine. There's probably no contact there, but constantly stepping in and out on that wire, I just worry over time that's going to fray out and it'll cause an issue down the line. So I'm going to try to run it up over the top still. Then I'm going to try to come down right here into, this will be a panel here. I'll come down, drop into this hole, follow that all the way down. This is going to be a thicker panel here, which allows me some space to actually come back out like these wires are. Go down, and I'll just follow this thing, this harness here, down along in this channel. And then I can lead it back up behind this panel, into back here where they already are, and to the receiver. So again, it's another, setback as I'm going through. I mean, I'm just trying to plan, getting all the final paneling done up here, and I'm just thinking, this is almost pointless just to put it in for that amount of time. Try to cover all that up with the panel and whatnot. So it's going to take a little modification. Another pain in the ass, but it is what it is. Okay, in order to access this hole, I had to remove the seatbelt assembly, and it's these star bits, the T50 size, and there's just two of them. You can kind of pull the plastic back to get it out of the way when you loosen those up, and then you should be able to just move it out of the way to tighten it back in there. And now I'm just feeding it down through that hole until you can start getting it down to the bottom here, which it looks like. The video cable's right there. So I'll start to come out of that hole with it here, so I can start fitting it kind of back behind this. Alright, so I refastened the seatbelt assembly back on. You can see it was just a bit easier with that in the way. I wanted to make sure I could get that through with ease. And then down here it comes through, and then I slipped it behind the seatbelt with this other wiring harness. It goes down the channel. Now I'm going to run it up through here behind and to the receiver. Okay, so now I ran it down through the channel, pulled this plate off, ran it up behind here. There's a little slot opening, and then I ran it up. There's a metal plate that comes off. There's 4 bolts there. Just made it easier to slip up inside. And I ran it along here. I'll throw a zip tie up just to keep it up out of the way. When I close the engine hasp, ran it behind the deck in the frame. And Jesus, back out right here. I just barely reached, but I'll get everything hooked back up. Upon further review, that wire that initially entered here, I decided to go up and over and behind. It's just going to make it a lot easier concealing these wires up here. So got that all ran, wired back up back here. So something I thought would be really cool to incorporate into the van, being it a stealth conversion, was have a setup to where you could turn on both the receiver and the rear view camera just by switch in the front cab. So at any time you could, if you're just chilling, want to listen to the radio, you could flip the power switch on. Don't need to put the key in, do anything like that. And then in addition to that, you'll be able to flip an additional switch and turn on your rear view camera. And that gives you the ability to see what's behind you at any time. If you want to, scope out if there's an animal or people pulling up behind you, you can see who it is without actually having to look through the windows, open the doors. So this is a cool little trick that I figured out using relays to do that. So here are a couple pictures of electrical relays if you're not sure what I'm talking about when I reference those. They come in a bunch of different varieties and setups. These in particular are both a 4-pin and a 5-pin, which I use in this project, and they are 12 volt. And in layman's terms, what a relay is and what its function is you're basically diverting a constant power source to an accessory or something that you need to send power to when something happens. So a signal happens, and how it does that is when a positive signal comes through that relay, it switches that circuit over, and then therefore will send your accessory power when that particular action happens. Okay, so these relays you can find at pretty much any auto parts store. Walmart's will probably have them in their automotive sections. Probably the easiest way to find them though is just by ordering them on Amazon. I did get mine from AutoZone though, and they were reasonably priced, like $8-9, but I think you can get them cheaper on Amazon. So I can post a link to a couple that would work in this specific setup. But what I wanted to do is go over kind of what each input and output does on a 5-pin relay shown here. So on the back of it, they'll have numbers next to each of the prongs. And the number 30 to start with is the constant 12 volt power. So you're sending a charge, and you could do it when the ignition's on, or you can use one when the ignition's off. In this case, you will want a constant 12 volt even when the ignition is off, and that goes to your 30 prong. Your 85 is going to be your ground, so I just ground to the chassis from that. And then your 86 will be your signal wire. So when a signal comes in, a positive charge comes in from, in this instance, we're using the reverse lights as the signal, because when I put the vehicle in reverse, I want it to send the signal to this, in which case then the 87, which is going to be active and the circuit connected to the constant power charge when your signal wire is activated. So when I put the vehicle in reverse, the reverse lights come on. It sends that positive signal to the 86 prong, and therefore it connects 30 to 87, sending power to your accessory. Now, when you're not getting a signal, 30 is actually connected to 87A. So you'll see how I have that use of that in this instance to make this whole system work. Okay, to start with, let me just show you how to hook up the receiver unit to turn on by switch rather than actually having to turn the vehicle on or using a key to turn the receiver on. This will allow you to turn the receiver and the radio on at any time just by the flip of a switch. So starting off, here's the vehicle harness, meaning this is the actual wires that come from the vehicle wiring setup, like from the power distribution. So what you want to do is you want to start with your always on, which is typically yellow, and you're gonna put that into a barrel connector on one end. So you are still always keeping your always on to the receiver unit, which allows you to store things like your favorite channels and the clock and things like that. So that's going to be used there, but it's also going to double as your constant power at your 30 input on the 5-prong relay. Next is going to be the vehicle ignition signal. So that's when you've turned the key on, it sends a 12-volt signal down, and typically you would just have this connected right to your receiver unit, but since I want the option to go through a switch, I have to move through the relay. So I run that vehicle ignition signal from the vehicle harness down to the signal prong on the 5-prong relay. And so when I actually do turn the vehicle ignition on, it will send that power down through 87 and will give the receiver power. So it'll still work when I turn the key on. I obviously don't want to sacrifice that. But here's the key, is when the vehicle ignition signal is not on, my constant power is actually being sent to 87A. So that therefore moves through this line over to my power input switch. And so that is then when the ignition power is not being sent, this will have the power sent to the input on the switch. Then if you were to switch that, it would send power down through the accessory output to the receiver unit, which is connected here. You'll obviously want to chassis ground both your switch and your 5-prong relay. So now this will set you up. So you flip the switch, the receiver unit will turn on, or if you flip the ignition on with the key, it will still turn that receiver unit on. Okay, so the next thing here is how you're going to wire up for multiple purposes on your rear view camera, but primarily this will be to integrate the passive noise filter, and it will give the ability for you to manually switch on the rear view camera and will tell the receiving unit that you want to view the rear view camera source. So the first thing you're going to do is you'll be doing the add a fuse line out of your fuse box. In this instance, I'll show you how to do that in the video following this diagram. So you're going to add that fuse in. You're going to tie that into the 30, and you're going to daisy chain that together with the quick connect prong connection. And you'll run your other one out of that daisy chain to the switch power input. So what this will allow you to do is actually send your accessory power out to the rear view camera and your receiver backup signal wire here. So this will all be daisy chained together. So there'll be two instances where you'll be able to utilize that, both when the signal wire, which is going to be reverse lights, so when you put the vehicle in reverse, the reverse lights come on, it sends that signal down the line to the 86 prong, therefore connecting the constant power from the add a fuse line over to 87, which will send the signal to your receiving unit and will send power to the rear view camera to give you a little bit more of a clear signal to that, and gives you the ability to pass through this passive electrical noise filter. So what this does is you're coming out of the 87 here with a power line, and then you're going to run through the passive noise filter. In this case, I'll link the product I used here, and you'll run out to the red wire, and the blue wire is what passes down to power the rear view camera. And what that does is there's a capacitor in here, and that stores up energy so that when there's variance in the electrical signals, it holds a constant charge, and therefore you're not getting that interference over the line, so it sends it in a more concise and clear way down to the rear view camera. And you'll obviously want to ground that to the chassis. I daisy chained the switch ground and the chassis ground over to the 85 and then to the chassis. So at the end of the day, you can either switch on the power to pull up the picture of the rear view camera on the receiver, and if you put the vehicle in reverse, it will also do the same thing. So this is kind of how you're going to set that up. You will need to be able to switch on the receiver power, how I showed you in the previous diagram. You will need both these switches when the vehicle is all the way off for this to function when the vehicle does not have the key in it and does not have the ignition turned on with the key. So this is the main basis on how you'll set that all up, and then we'll go into how to set up the add a fuse now. So here's the add a fuse, and basically what you're doing here is you want your new accessory to go on the top here, the fuse for that. So that's just going to be a 15 amp. It is a 30 amp for the old fuse for the power seats. So you never want your top one to exceed your bottom one, because that's going to be your main stopping point. There's the bottom one. So that's, you're not going to do anything if you put a bigger one on top. You're not going to protect whatever you're trying to protect on this side. It's just going to be based on this fuse here. So since it'll be a little bit less power for the camera, I don't want to have a 30 amp breaker there, so I'm running a little bit less just to make sure if there's a surge of power or something there, it'll stop at that 15. And then naturally, here's your accessory power out. That will go to, like I said before, that will be going to the 30, which is your constant 12 volt DC power. So this obviously runs to the 12 volt DC constant power in your relay. That's what's going to provide power to this actual switch here. And essentially, once signals are made here, the input signals, it'll send power down the road to the different devices that you need. So a few things you want to know about when you're taking these out and installing one of these add a fuse is you want to find out which side is going to be your constant power side or your 12 volt. So let's see if I can get in here. So there's two sides of the fuse. One side is going to be your power. In this case, it is the left side. So when you're testing this, you're basically going to try to find out which one is giving you the 12 volt power. And you can do that by touching the outside of the fuse and then grounding your multimeter. And whichever side is showing you 12 volts is going to be the side that you're going to need to orientate this piece here. So in this instance, your 12 volts is going to come in on your left side in orientation to where it goes through the fuse and out to your accessory. So this side is going to have to plug in to, in my case, the left side. So it will be orientated like this when I install it. So you just want to make sure you have proper clearance when you're plugging it in to get around all the things. So mine's going in right here, and there you go. It's all plugged in now. It does have clearance. It's in there securely. Now I'll just have to run this to the relay, which will be placed up in here, and I'll show you that in a minute. Alright, boys and girls, let me give you the rundown here. I got everything all wired up, all the connection points and everything. So if you look back up in here, here's my 5-point relay, my 5-pin relay. I just have it temporarily grounded right now, but it'll just be for demonstration purposes. So in here, your harness here, this is going to be your ignition that comes from your engine, which is supposed to connect to your deck. However, now I ran this to 86 because I want, when the car is turned on, this should power 87, which would be right here on this side. Therefore, that will charge the deck. Now, this here was my main power source. So that's the always on, the DC from the harness up to the deck. So that before was just to keep the settings on the radio on. Now I have that both connected, so that always will keep the radio charged. Plus it's my 30 now, my 30 pin, which means that's my always on power. That's what's charging this whole relay. Then you have your 85 that just goes to a ground, which I have on this metal piece here. That will be going over here because I'm going to put my switches on the driver's side here, and I have another ground point there. It was just easier for me to set this up just to make sure everything worked correctly. Now, the 87A, which is the middle one. Now, right now, that goes to that goes to the power of my switch. So that's my power input to my switch. The power output, again, goes and ties back into the positive that will go into the actual deck. Therefore, when I switch this on, the deck power's on. And This way, I can be chilling without the key in the ignition. If I just want to flip the battery on to turn the radio on for the rest of the vehicle, I don't have to turn the ignition on at all. I don't have to turn it to accessory. This was also something that I wanted to do, so at night, if I wanted to kind of see what was behind me, I could flip my deck on, and I could also how to power my reverse switch. So when I flip this, I get my reverse camera on. So now when the vehicle's off, if I ever want to kind of turn on the back camera, I just flip these two switches. Don't need to turn on the vehicle at all. Don't need to scramble to find the keys or anything like that. So it'll be a nice little feature, just for convenience factor and for security factors. The next thing was to place the switches. I just used a step bit and then kind of filed out the inside around the holes, and then I connected everything in back, ran all the wiring up, connected the relays just with a zip tie up on the inner workings of the frame. It's right there. So it wasn't too bad. It took a lot longer than I would have liked, but it is nice to have in place now. Okay, so as you can see, ignition's off, key is not in the vehicle. I have my first switch set up here. That turns on the receiver, and it just takes a minute for that to start up. But now you can listen to the radio without having to put the key in. Be a kind of cool setup there. Now, if I want to check what's behind me as a sort of a surveillance thing, I flip the second switch, and now the rear view camera is on. Turn that off. Turn that off. Now, second, if I turn the vehicle on, that does still come on. And without putting it in reverse, I can always see how far someone is behind me, what's going on. You could even use this as a rear view mirror if you really wanted to, even with the radio on. So it's a cool little setup. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and we'll catch you on the next one.